Jeremy from Jeremy.net. I'm a comic book artist, writer, creator. I share my creative process here with you on the internet. If you'd like to support this channel, get additional bonus live streams, see my artwork and comic book pages before anybody else, you can go to patreon.com/GERIMI. If you'd like to see the best of my social media posts from Instagram, Twitter, all collected in one place every month, you can sign up for my monthly newsletter at newsletter.jeremy.net. And to buy physical copies of my comics to read digitally on Amazon, Kindle, or Comixology, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. And speaking of Patreon, I've got to give a shout out to first poster in the chat, Hyena Vaughn, who was already a Patreon subscriber, but upped his pledge. So he is keeping the main live stream free for you guys. So everybody, please give Hyena tons of thanks. He's making this possible for you guys. So, and if you would like to join him and support, again, patreon.com/GERIMI. So today we have a guest planned for the channel, and I just need to keep an eye out for when he pops in. So I will keep an eye out for that. In the meanwhile, I continue to work on my comic book Morningstar. So let's see here. Before I dive into this comic book page, let me grab my little smudge guardy glove for all of those working digitally. All right, there we go. Now, Hyena did have a question that he posed to me before we got started, and that question was about landmarks and what landmarks we look for in the figure. So let me see what landmarks the artists use when they're learning to study bones and studying, getting into the basic deeper structure of the anatomy. So let me see here. I'm trying to see if there's a good panel in this page that I'm working on. All of these are either medium shots. There's only one full shot. But let me just sketch in a quick figure, and hopefully this can describe what I was going to, what I was thinking of. So usually when we talk about landmarks, they're the bones that are hitting the surface of the figure. So let's say I've got this panel where I've got a character, I don't know, trying to hold up a ceiling or something. That's not what's going to be happening in this panel, but it'll make for a simple example. Make sure I'm on the right layer. Turn down the opacity on the brush. So I would start with a simple stick figure gesture, like let's say an arm. Have it come all the way down to the hips here. So when it comes to landmarks, I think of it as the bones that hit the surface of the figure, and particularly the joints. So those are the big landmarks we're looking for. In the torso, what we're looking for is, let's see, I've got these two arms. Let's say that they're just holding up the comic book panel. This whole comic book page is going to fall apart unless they hold it. So the pit of the crotch, the base of the pelvis, is probably the first landmark. And then if you were to draw a center line all the way up the figure, you follow it around where it bends, the next landmark would be the pit of the neck. Now, going back down, you want to get the landmarks that define these two regions. So the first region being let me lower the opacity a little bit more. The first region being the rib cage, the second region being the pelvis. So what you want, the next two landmarks are the landmarks that define the separation between these two regions, or the endpoints. So for the rib cage, you don't necessarily see it if the character is, heavier set, But the bottom of the rib cage, you can see where the muscle, where the ribs curve back up towards the midpoint of the chest, because the rib cage splits in half. And what you're looking for in terms of rib cage is both that split happens basically in the center of the rib cage, about the fifth rib. And then that terminal end where the ribs curve up. And in fact, as we're talking, I realize, let me move this to larger so that you can just have me off to the side. You don't need to see me up there. So you've got the pit of the neck, base of the crotch, bottom of the rib cage, split of the rib cage. Then in the pelvis, you've got the iliac crest, which are the two bones that come up out of the top of the pelvis above the belt line. I see a few more folks showing up in the chat. I see Daniel's in here. Says, what's up? How you doing? Thanks for dropping by. So we've got the iliac crest, base of the pelvis. And now moving out to the rest of the figure, the other landmarks would be the hip bones, or rather where the hips reach the surface. Because the hip, well, the entire femur, that's the thigh bone. But the head of the femur, where it connects to the pelvis, those are our hips. So on either side, those two are landmarks. Then the knees, from there it's just joints. So the knees are landmarks, the ankles are landmarks, and the ankle is higher on the inside than it is on the outside. On the outside, the ankle bone actually sticks back a little bit. And then in the upper body, would say the landmark, it's hard to see it in this pose. I just realized drawing the hands going up above your head, the collarbone actually, the landmark I'm talking about is where the collarbone and the scapula, the shoulder blade, meet, and that's kind of a cap over the top of the upper arm, the humerus. So where these two meet is definitely a landmark, but that landmark gets hidden when you raise your arm up above. So if I were to drop this arm down so it wasn't holding up the panel, you could say that there's another landmark up there. You can make these darker, maybe smaller. Oh, and as I mentioned, we have a guest. So let me bring him in and add him to the stream. There we go. Let me pull my monitor out real quick. John, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you? Can you hear me all right?
Yes. Yeah, you're gonna get double. I don't usually have headphones on, but I just have the one sound coming back there. For the audience, this is my buddy John Ercek, comic creator and color artist, and thought I'd bring him on here and just hang out with us, talk comics, talk shop. I realized in all the times we've talked, I've mostly known you working mainstream in comics as a colorist and color artist, but also, you draw as well. I know that like most people that work in comics have multiple skill sets. There's lots of people who are letterers, colorists, inkers who are fine artists in their own right. Do you have other personal projects that you comic-wise or beyond that you also work in various parts besides coloring in addition to coloring?
Yeah, like everybody in comics, yeah, of course we're all working on our personal projects, but no, we're not working on them because there's not enough time to work on them. But it's to the effect that everybody has various interests or everybody's is multidimensional. I actually have more credits as a digital inker than I do as a colorist. So, I mean, that's the way it goes. But I try to work on what I can when I can, like anybody else. But the biggest thing is the teaching on the side. So I'm teaching figure drawing. I'm teaching foundational drawing, and lately I've been teaching a class on robotics, which has been really fun. Now the classes are for kids, but it's still a great experience just to cover the basics when you're teaching kids, because it never goes away. I'm still teaching the same thing to the kids that I'm teaching to the adults. It's just the adults, you get to move a little faster. That's all there is to it. So yeah, that's about it. I'm working on something right now, and I think it's kind of funny. You were talking about the landmarks of the collarbone with the shoulder, and I was struggling with just what you were talking about with what the project I'm working on right now is. Oh, I can share my screen. Let's see.
Oh, yes, please do. Let me see. I don't know if I have to also add it or whether you just share it and it pops up. Let's see.
It's warning that I might get a bug.
Up there we go, and add to the stream. Pow! Okay.
Yeah.
Superman shot here.
Yeah. I've been trying to. In fact, one of the things I was tempted to do is I was tempted to send you this and see if you could have a shot at my head on this, because I've done. Let's see, where is it? I've done 4 different heads on this guy just because of different angles. And Superman's just so hard to draw. You can draw a lot of characters just because you're drawing the character, but Superman's so iconic. There's an expectation of him that I'm not happy with this face at all. I'm happy with the rest of the body, but I had a lot of problems trying to figure out where the collarbone was on just this figure. Even though you don't see the collarbone, but it's because it's an upshot from the bottom. So it's the way it goes.
Well, you know what? It's funny. I'm taking a look at that. I want to see if there's a way I can take a screen grab of this and then drop it into Procreate so I can just use it as I'm working. And I think, let me see here. Let's try.
Oops, sorry. How far in do you want it?
You know what? Go zoom in one more. I think that is good because I kind of need the rest, like enough of the upper body that I can use that as reference. Now I just need to shoot this screen grab over to Procreate. little digital experimentation on the fly.
I'm almost sorry I didn't send it to you. Oh god, these teeth look so bad on this guy. I'm so happy with the body, but I'm so unhappy with the face. I actually want to turn the face off, just like a headless Superman. If they ever create a character named Headless Superman, I'm in for the job.
That would actually be pretty cool, Headless Superman.
He can team up with the Batman Who Laughs, right?
That would be a
Spiky and no Spiky.
Just let me airdrop.
I'm checking out the chat. Somebody asked me where I went to art school. I went to art school at USC. I went to the School of Fine Arts. Wanted to go into animation. I figured because USC was such a good film school, they would have a good animation program. And they did, but it was a good animation program for graduate students, not undergraduate students. So the whole time I was just fighting the bureaucracy.
You know what's funny? Just the fact that you mentioned that. So I was, at your crosstown rival because I was at UCLA.
Right on.
And we had the exact same scenario where the animation program was a graduate program, and the only way you could to take the upper level classes, you had to be a grad student in the film program. But for the undergrad classes, the first 3, there was like a basic storyboarding class and then 2 intro level animation classes. And in order to take those, those were open, so you could take those classes even if you weren't in the graduate program. So that's when I ended up my junior and senior year. I was using up all of my my elective classes for that. So let's see here. I am sending this to Procreate, and hopefully it should pop up. And by the way, just to give everybody else listening, usually, like John, you've seen my stream before. Most of the stream is honestly drawing and then just answering questions from the chat. I'm going to be, just so everyone knows, we'll come back and forth to the chat because John and I are just talking and catching up. We're going to miss a lot of questions. This is going to be a little different from the usual one, but don't feel slighted. We will touch base.
I'd like to think that since there's two of us with an eye on chat, who knows, maybe we'll actually catch them.
That's actually true. You know, we may do even better. So
are you on a dual monitor setup, by the way?
You know, I am on a dual monitor setup, but technically I'm on a triple monitor setup because I have my my Cintiq. I actually have a 12-inch, and I have that on my drawing table above, like it's below my camera, but it's up here so I can see you while we're talking. And then below my Cintiq is my iPad, and that's what I'm actually sharing on the screen, because you can just share that by turning on QuickTime. So when I go back here and I go share screen, hang on. Let me flip back over and.
Errol was pointing out that I probably added too many details before I established my forms, and it's like, yeah, no, because I'm happy with the form on the rest of the body. It's just the head. So he's absolutely right. I'm not sure what gender Errol is. Sorry.
Oh, but, yeah, Amar's a dude.
But yeah, no, you're absolutely right, because the angle of the head, and even to the effect that getting the head right isn't even the goal, because if I get the head right, what I did figure out was if I get the head right, I'm at an angle where you don't even see his face. So then it becomes a situation where you're thematically cheating the situation. It's a little bit of mise-en-scene stuff. So where you're tilting the head forward just for the sake of the illusion.
Oh, by the way, I see that that Amar had asked about the link to join my Discord server, because I've been sharing artwork and giving feedback on that. The Discord is actually for Patreon subscribers, so you can get on there if you join the pay what you want tier. But I have actually released a critique and feedback tier where people can send me art 1 to 3 pieces a month, and then when I do the private Patreon live stream, we'll go through and I'll just do a few pieces from each person and live stream, talk through and give a critique. So that's where the Discord is. So again, another bonus of joining the Patreon. All right. So let's take a look at this. All right. So I've got it on my screen.
All right. I'll stop my share.
Oh, no, you can leave the share up, because what I can do is I can pop back in and back out of the, like I can control swapping them in and out. So you can leave it on there if you want to share stuff later. You can just leave it up open. So in terms of the collarbone, let me bring this brush size down. So the collarbone, it's not that it's hidden from this, it's that the collarbone is almost like it's the cap to the pec muscles. So while the place where it attaches to the shoulder will bend away from the viewer, like the actual attachment that I was talking about in terms of landmarks, where it connects with the shoulder blade, yeah, that's hidden. It's going to be behind. When I say behind, I mean it's going to be on the top surface, but just turning away. But, you know, if we see it sitting on the collarbone, I think for me, I would start with where the actual neck is attaching, because it seems like if the center line of the chest is here, like if we were to run a center line from crotch up to the center of the collarbone, even if I scoot this over a little bit more, it seems like his neck is pulled a little bit too far over. So I would start by saying, all right, the neck is maybe, let's say it's this wide, this line to that line.
Yeah. Okay, I see. Yeah. Well, so keep in mind that there's the tilt to that rib cage. That rib cage is tilting away from it. You got to see the rib cage as a three-dimensional egg going back, and see where the spine is with the sternum, and then locate an oval rotating away from us.
Yeah, you're right about that. Like if I continue,
But then the other problem is the opening of the neck is not perfectly level on the top of our rib cage.
Mhm.
So and then that's where you get into more subtleties. So
well, I mean, that's the thing. I'm one of those people. Like when I am doing stuff and I have trouble seeing something, as soon as somebody else starts pointing it out, I'm like, oh yeah, I see what you're doing now. I know that you know all of this stuff. It's just one of those things where having a second eye going, oh wait, if I change this, oh, it's just a matter of moving it over. I tend to use a lot of the Andrew Loomis and George Bridgman doesn't do it as much. But with Loomis, with a lot of figures, he'll like put them in boxes first if they're a complicated form.
Yeah.
I kind of like to, for me, I'll figure out what are my boundaries. Like let's say that, forget about the fact that the neck curves up higher in the back. But if I said, all right, I just have a cylinder and I have a box that's sitting on top of that cylinder. And for me, even if he's looking to the right directly at what his hand is reaching out to, I am of the mindset that I try to think about the stage. And in terms of staging, I would probably do something where I wouldn't have his head facing directly that way. I would have his head turned slightly more towards the camera, and then just have his eyes looking directly at the object. That way you get a little bit more, like the angle becomes less extreme, but it becomes less extreme so that you'll get a better face shot, because you drew a really
yeah.
It's a great, you did a great job of drawing a hard thing. But even for me, where's my stupid skulls? All right. Like with this guy, I still have hard times drawing him from like this angle. And it's a dramatic angle. I think we all like those dramatic angles, but I have a hard time drawing this guy when you're seeing a lot of that underside of the chin. So for me, I would do it where I'm doing less of the thing that's difficult. And then it just is a matter of, placing the ears in. I don't need to necessarily even finish this off because you can see where I'm going with it. All I would do is do it like this and then have his eyes so that the eyes are to the side so that he's looking at the thing. And I would probably even, instead of trying to draw so much of the underside of the chin, I would probably let his chin come down a little bit more because he just have that lantern jaw. Almost so that as opposed to you looking at that broad underside, it's almost like you're getting just a little bit of the underside, instead of an extreme underside. So it's almost like he's got his head tucked down like he's pushing, but because you're looking at him from a low angle, you're seeing very little of the tuck. It almost seems like it's a straight on pose.
Yeah, and what I like about what you're doing is this is a little bit more balanced to the gesture with the arm swinging back the other way. Because with the arm cocked back all the way back there, that's a lot of stretch in the neck, whereas it's more natural at the tilt that you have.
Well, yeah, but that's actually that kind of that magic of the what is it? Will Eisner says Bigfoot artists versus Littlefoot artists, and he says you can't be a good Littlefoot artist unless you can cartoon and exaggerate. And sometimes I do this where I will try to push a pose and make it cartoony, and sometimes I push it and I'm all, oh, that's too far. Like that's the thing. I can see that where his neck is in the pose you have it is kind of the natural exaggeration of the direction you're already going, and it's just a matter of, oh, maybe I stretched it a little too far.
Yeah.
Because the pose is good, the body's good, and I think you actually did the right way, because this is something that when I've taken figure drawing classes for years, the instructor I study with, Carl Ganas, he says all the time, get the body right, and he says get all of the placement of the volumes before you start drawing the face and the details, because if you draw a heads are so hard to get right that if you draw a good head, you will spend forever trying to fix a body that's not working. Whereas if you get the body working, the head should you just pop on the head like, oh wait, that's not right. Let me just change this. Let me just change that. Let me just change that. You're willing to keep working on that head to get it right. Whereas with the body, you'll say you may have a head that you drew well, but if you're drawing the body second, like if you had that head already in that position and you finished it off, it was completely finished, but it was in the wrong pose, and then you were doing the body, you would just spend forever trying to make that body work when it was really, the head's position needs to be changed. But you'll never change that head position because you drew a head you liked. And once you draw a head you like, you're like, I'm not giving up that head.
Yeah, and to that effect, that's how I counsel my artists in figure drawing. Is like, how many times have you been in figure drawing? You draw some reading circle for the head, then you draw the body, and then you realize you have to move the circle for the head. Mm-hmm. So it took a little bit of discipline, but I filtered that out in my process where I don't start with the head when I'm drawing the body, and this whole headless Superman is just like peak not starting with the head for the gesture. So
all right, I'm looking at this and I see one thing, and it's not something that's wrong with the pose. It's one thing that I'm going to throw out there, and then you're going to say, why'd you tell me that?
No, I can't wait. This is one of those good things.
Because I see the one thing in terms of the pose that the head is in, that pose would work if the head were exaggerated even more. I mean, not the head, if the torso were exaggerated even more, so that, because you've got the pelvis, if I do it just in boxes, you've got the pelvis. We've got an upshot of the pelvis, and then we've got the torso bending, the rib cage bending. And what I was going to say is, if you were to take that pelvis, the rib cage, and you were to say, all right, instead of bending it like this, you were to say, I'm going to bend it even more so that he's really leaning in to the thing that he's pushing.
Yeah.
If you were leaning into the thing he's pushing, and then let me just rough in so that now, no, those arms are way too big.
You know what? This arm is already too big, but I kind of left it. Just let it be a little bit of exaggeration that it is.
No, I don't mean yours. I mean what I started drawing. I think this is it's got like a slight fisheye to it, but it works because it's such a forced perspective.
Yeah.
But my point was just, I think what you've got going already is great. I do not recommend doing this at all. But in looking at the pose you had for the head, if you were to really crank his rib cage like he's straining into whatever he's pushing, then that angle where the head is twisted more to the side, that angle might having that angle a little bit more dramatic might fit. It's starting to remind me of like the George Reeves serial Superman.
Yeah.
Now,
or even some of the old Fleischer animations where they definitely did a lot to exaggerate the movement like for a punch. I should go through the Fleischer animations. I'd probably find this exact pose in one of the Fleischer ones.
Yeah. But again, this thing was just me happening to look at the pose for a second and say, huh. But I honestly think that I think that the thing that I drew before was just moving the neck over and then adjusting the head so that the neck angle isn't as extreme. I think that's a much better solution because it means not changing anything else you've already drawn.
Yeah.
And I think it works because everything else works. I love the body feels super strong, super solid. Let's see here. Oh yeah, even it's funny. We mentioned the flasher animations, or you mentioned the flasher animations because Amar also is an animator, and he said that it's an animation thing related to gesture. He said in terms of drawing through for visualizing the objects. Yeah, animation. I will tell you that animation is the thing that saved me as an artist because I know you mentioned at SC that them having an animation program. I was a fine art major in college because we didn't have an illustration program at UCLA, and they had a design program that probably had a little bit more traditional illustration in it. But I was an odd duck in that I was an illustrator in a school that taught gallery artists, and they couldn't care. They taught you a lot about creativity and analyzing your art, how to speak about it, how to come up with unique ideas, writing artist statements. And to try and challenge what we think of as art. Those are all very good things to learn, but they didn't care if you could draw your way out of a paper bag. So I actually came out of college, I think, more creative, but I was a worse draftsman. And it wasn't until like my junior or senior year when I started taking those animation classes and I saw, oh wait, animators need to understand how to draw things. They need to understand how to revolve a form in their mind so they can draw it from any angle. And I've heard that mentioned to me before, but I've never sat down and been in an instructional program where they teach that until I started taking animation classes. And that saved me as an artist because I think it made me realize, oh, wait, I'm graduating from college and I don't know from art school, and I don't really know how to draw.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
For a lot of my compatriots, when I was at USC, they were going to AFI to take classes while they were still in college. I just hated the idea of one, spending more money, and two, I thought it was BS that they had to do that. But that attitude really held me back. It was like, the only reason why I got any draftsmanship from my experiences at USC was because I independently pursued them. I would crash some animation classes, and then I had one teacher actually reappropriate a class that wasn't supposed to be figure drawing. And he was like, this class is stupid. We're just going to bring in a model every week. And we did that for 2 years, and then he finally got busted. And so it was hard to just get figure drawing when I was at SC, and that was a real bummer. I saw somebody in the chat ask which books I recommend to my students, and at a certain point, you recommend all of them. Because, you have your basics. You have Loomis, you have Bridgman, even Hogarth. But that's a little bit too easy because one, there's no one magic book, and to that effect, who was the artist on Watchman again?
Dave Gibbons.
So I'm not sure if you heard. I've heard Barbara tell this story several times. Barbara Randall Kiesel was the editor on Watchmen for a number of the issues, and because she was the only one that had a license, because everybody worked in New York, it was her duty to drive Dave Gibbons around anytime he came to visit because he wanted to see all the different bookstores. And he would go to all these bookstores and he'd open up the art books, and if he saw one thing that he liked in the art book, he would buy it. The rest of the book could be junk with that one little trick, right? So at a certain point, there's nothing to recommend in terms of books because you see the same recommendations on the internet all the time. It's like for figure drawing, yes, Loomis. I take that back. There are a few books that have come on the market recently that you're like, okay, this is some new stuff and this should be recommended. The guy that does the Force Method. There's another one when I saw it, it was only in French. They were still making translations of it, and I can't remember. I think it.
Is it Rocher?
the name was weird. It was like Figuromo or Atomo or something like that.
Oh,
So
Morpho.
Morpho. There you go. That's the one.
Yes,
I saw that one.
know. I believe it's a woman. I'm not positive. I believe it's a woman who publishes those books, and somebody recommended them to me, and I agree. They look amazing.
Yeah.
What's funny is I had made one. There was a video I made a few years ago about what I call reference rot, which is where you think by buying the book you're going to buy the knowledge, and that's not true. You buy the book, you have to open the book, read the book, practice the things inside of the book, and until you do that, you just have a book. You just have a bunch of papers sitting on the shelf. And I realized that I have built up a pretty massive library of instructional and inspirational art books, and I've maybe looked at like 15 pages of each of them. And
or how many of them have you even read? Right, like half of them you just like we've seen the illustrations. This is amazing. We're visual artists. We can get a lot of information just from looking at the illustrations, right? We almost don't need to read them. But how many of them have you actually read? So.
Yes, exactly. And I got to the point where I started a thing again on the Patreon, but I called it my art book study group, where I would just the whole goal was there's tons of art books that I feel like I should be studying from and haven't. So I would just sit down at the start of the book and just go through it page by page, doing sketches and studies from the book until I worked through that, and then move to another book, and then move to another book. Because I used to, I don't have Bridgman's Complete Guide to Drawing. What I have are, you know how Dover used to publish like a bunch of like 100, 120 page Bridgman books. There was like a collection of like 5 to 8 of them.
Right.
Yeah, I have all of those small Bridgman books instead of the one big collection. And what I would do is I would used to take either the Human Machine or Constructive Anatomy, and twice a year I would just copy the book.
Wow.
I would open the book, and like for an hour every day during lunch, I would work on it. And I would just start on page 1, and I would just copy the drawings there, and then page 2, and then page 3. But when I was copying them, I wasn't copying them like I was doing a master study. I wasn't trying to replicate George Bridgman's drawing, because I mean, George Bridgman is kind of like Kirby in my mind, in the sense that when you first see it, you don't realize how beautiful it is. Like, I was one of those people who came to Kirby late, because when I first saw it, I'm like, it's blocky and chunky. I'm not that into it. And then years later, I see the beauty. Bridgman was the same thing to me. When I first saw Bridgman, I thought it was kind of ugly.
Yeah. My first reaction was I was amazed by it, because I've been I remember encountering it in college, and I was really big on Hogarth, like any stupid any stupid comic book teenager would be. And now I look at Hogarth and I'm like, oh man. now I see what those, because when you're in college, everybody's making fun of some of the teachers are cool, and yeah, comic books are cool, and then others are like, yeah, comic books, don't draw from them, right? And now you just learn. But now you see it. But the thing with Bridgman was, I was amazed that when I was looking at graphite on paper, I felt like I was looking at clay that was standing up 3-dimensionally in front of me. So it jumped out at me in a big way really quickly. But I mean, at the same time, there are other artists that when I first saw them, I didn't like. So it's just the flip side of that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing you said there, just about it feeling like clay, that was the magic. Is that he makes things feel volumetric. It makes him feel 3-dimensional. I realized, this is what my art's missing, is making it feel like a physical, solid object that you're looking at, even though it's on paper. And I guess I've been chasing that ever since. Ever since I really... part of it's also that I was exposed to Bridgman in high school, and my brain was, I think, just not developed enough to understand what he was trying to convey.
Yeah.
And I've even thought to myself that I wonder whether Bridgman is good for beginning artists, only in that I feel like you almost need to know how to draw a little bit already, and then say, how do I make this better? And then you look at Bridgman. Because I think if you look at Bridgman first and try to draw like him, for me, I found it. I didn't really know what to do with what he was giving us.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's I used to copy the Bridgman books. Like I would copy them, not trying to copy his drawings, but trying to copy what he's teaching. What's the idea he's putting down in each drawing? What form is he trying to explain? What mechanism of the human body is he trying to explain? And my goal was to diagram or physically get on paper the concept, not to have a drawing that looked like his.
Right. And to that effect, I went through something even worse because it took me a long time to get over it. But when I went into SC, I thought I was going to do computer animation. So I was viewing drawing very analytically. Like my attitude was, you can draw anything as long as you focus on the fundamentals, right? So as long as I can get a sphere or a cylinder or a box at the right perspective, at the right angle, and then just navigate my way up from there, right? Mm-hmm. And to this day, and even in my head right now, they still feel very robotic. They don't have an essence to them. And the flip side of that is, when I was in school, I had no appreciation or even respect for artists that were willing to work in different media. Like if suddenly the assignment was to take twine and dip it in coffee grinds and make an art piece, the other artists would be up for that. And I was just like, how am I supposed to use that on an animation production? So I totally shined it. I did not want to do that, right? But the problem was, I had no appreciation whatsoever for drawing intuitively and looking at something as an experience and then capturing that experience on paper. And that sounds very fluffy, and it sounds very like a hippie thing to say, right? And especially,
we need a little hippie energy sometimes, man.
Right. And I later come to respect it as I've been doing portraits where I'm drawing something that analytically, I know a line shouldn't be there, but as I'm looking at a person, I'm seeing a line there. And I started to realize that the more I let go of like the analytical approach to these portraits, the more I was starting to incorporate the emotional experience of sitting down with a person. So then later the artwork ends up on the wall, and the person looking at it experiences the experience as opposed to experiencing the visual. And I've started to realize that that's something that a lot of artists miss, because if you're drawing Batman in a Batcave, you're like, okay, there's a bunch of rocks and there's a ramp and you got to have Alfred coming down the steps, but you're leaving out the idea of being a child in a bedroom with grandma bringing them cookies, because when Alfred's bringing Batman any type of, there's sort of an experience there, and the better artists capture this experience, and it's that whole intuitive thing. So like you were with Bridgman, where you saw this clay-like structure and you just didn't grasp it at first. That was my biggest downfall when I went into college. I did not have the right appreciation in my head for art as an experience, art as enjoying art, because I was so focused on art as producing something as part of an assembly line. So I wanted to go to college. I wanted to learn how to do the work, and then I wanted to go do the work. And lo and behold, I missed something crucial there. So.
Well, they say that youth is wasted on the young. And there's, I mean, just the fact of knowing. I mean, the fact that you had a greater sense of knowing what you wanted to get out of college. I think you're still farther ahead than a lot of students. Because I know for myself, when I went to college, I just figured, all right, here's the program I'm in. What do they have to teach me? And what can I learn? And it wasn't until, again, later, like in my junior, senior year, when I started taking, electives, and I started taking independent studies. Like I worked on a comic book that I was in a studio in college, and we were working on an indie book, and I got to work on my indie book as an independent study program. And I just went to one of the professors and asked, but I didn't realize that just because the drawing teachers aren't teaching me volumetric drawing, I didn't know that I could go to them and say, hey, I know this isn't what you're teaching. This is what I want to learn. Can you
Yeah.
go aside and show me that? Like, I didn't realize that just about every particular area in college, every course I had, I could go to the instructor and say, hey, this is what I'm interested in. Will you teach me this? Regardless of whatever syllabus he has, whatever he's teaching in the class. I didn't know you could do that. And some professors might be a dick and say, no, stick in the class. But most of them will appreciate the fact that you have initiative and that you're trying to grow in a different direction, and they'll say, all right, yeah, this isn't my particular special area, but I know how to do it. Let me show you. And I wish that I wish I'd had that kind of wherewithal going into college, because I think I would have gotten a lot more out of it. But also part of that is, at that age, who really knows what they really do want anyway?
Yeah. No, big time. Big time. I had one teacher that was pretty good about it, pretty on the ball. It was at SC, you got figure drawing in one class for 1 year for 2 semesters. So that was the instructor. And so he was trying to help me with stuff like that. He was saying, well, how about you animate your figure drawings from class and do stuff like that? And it was just like, and I mean, he was kind of trying to do it, but the problem was this was, this was pre-computer. This was before computer animation was something you could really do on a consumer desktop. You still had to have access. Ironically, especially for 2D animation. 3D animation, you could get 3D Max and you can do some things. But for 2D animation, there was no hope because there's no way of displaying 24 frames per second reliably on your screen, which was ridiculous. But I mean, that was the 90s for you, which is when I was in college.
I see a question in the chat. Hyena Vaughn's asking, what do we think about the rumors that Frank Frazetta became Frazetta by drawing everything in the Bridgman books cover to cover? I've never heard that rumor.
Yeah, I've never heard that rumor either. I couldn't comment on that. From what I've read and heard of Frazetta, he was just very intense and was like, well, if he did that for Bridgman, then he probably did that for a few books. So, but yeah, so I couldn't speak to that rumor either.
Yeah, I mean, I'd never heard it, but it's, again, I have done, not every Bridgman book, but that if I had the time, I would, but I've done it with 1 or 2 Bridgman books multiple times. And that's my long goal, is eventually to work through all of my art books and just redrawing all of them, trying to see what I can learn from them. And, and I've got, once I get all of the drawing stuff down, then to go back to something like James Gurney and his color and light book and sit down and doing like watercolor studies and doing acrylic studies and working on values. And I mean, I feel like I get I have a decent foundation in terms of value study, in terms of drawing in black and white, but learning how to play with value and color temperature at the same time, or possibly using one in the place of the other, where you're keeping your values maybe more bracketed, or maybe you've just got, your light value, your dark value, but then doing all of your shifts within there with color temperature, or maybe making it color temperature and keeping all things within the same temperature, but doing stuff that's a little bit more.
Well, I mean, that you're making it sound like doing the gamut trapping exercise, which, are you familiar with? Because that comes from Gurney too. It's on one of his blogs. It's not from his. It's not in the color and light. And to that effect, I gotta say, like, I have that book. I like it. I like looking at the pictures. But the one shortfall of that book is it doesn't really go into explaining the methodology. So I just I looked through it and it's like, this is this shit. It's a little bit like reading a dictionary and then trying to figure out how to construct a sentence, because it's basically a glossary of situations and beautiful lighting. But for Gurney, if you're going to recreate anything, go through his blog and recreate the exercises he has on his blog, because there you get more of a methodology as opposed to just copying something but not getting the full explanation. And I think you got to keep in mind, these books, when they're made, especially the more widespread they are, the more you have to take into account that somewhere there was an editor and there was a sales marketing manager saying, okay, how can we sell as many of these books as possible? What's the lowest common denominator? And it's like, if the book is weighed down, like the expression is never put math into the books or anything like that, or for a lot of different consumer markets. So, when I look at Gurney's, God, I can't even remember the title. It's probably right there. Color and Light. Hey, look, there you go. It's right there. Someone very lovingly got it for me. So,
Not for us.
yeah, got it for us. She says. Yeah, I mean, God, just let's see. Oh, he does talk about gamut trapping. There you go. There's a page with gamut trapping. Let's see, right there.
Hang on, I'm going to make your screen larger.
Right. So all he does is he takes the color wheel and he basically isolates a section of it, and then that's the only part of the color wheel that you're allowed to pull colors from. Let me see if I can find a good example where it does it side by side. If it's not here, I'll find a link and post it in chat. But the idea is gamut trapping is a great exercise because you understand color as a relationship. Red and green is something that we learn in school or when we're as children. But a green is either red or it's blue compared to the green that it's sitting next to. Oh, here we go. So when you do gamut trapping, you get something like this exercise.
Ah.
All right. So that's a great exercise. That's definitely one worth doing. And then have you ever heard of the Zorn palette?
Oh yeah.
That's always fun. To take any of your covers or take any of your comic book pages and do the whole page in the Zorn palette. It's like
but I'm a huge fan of limited palettes in general. Just being able to work with just three hues and a white. I'm like, that's, honestly, even two hues. But and that's something Gurney does a lot in the blog post that he still continues to put on, where you can see just like him saying, nah, these are all the colors I use, and getting a pretty full range, something that you're perceptually. I think it goes back to what you were saying before about how the experience of, say, the Batcave felt. Like he does that with color, where it is not millions of colors in it. It's just two or three hues, but he gives you the feeling of what it is like to be in there with the overall color cast, but then B, giving you the individuals enough different notes of variation of hue within it that your mind perceives it as this is a full color illustration.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had at one point, and I haven't really gone deeper into it, but given the fact that most of my day job work is, CMYK printing, I went and I got a set of CMYK watercolors, not like a set, I just went and found tubes that were as close to CMYK colors as possible, and some acrylics. But the criticism I've heard of that is that if you're using pure CMYK, you kind of fall back into the trap of having, it's almost too many colors. There's nothing muted in it. Like everything is turned up, and you have to do a lot of mixing to get the subtleties that you get if you're just working with a Venetian red, a raw umber, and a yellow ochre.
Okay, so I can see where somebody would say that because going with a red, yellow, blue is such a limited. In fact, when you mentioned that, I was going to say I've taught in classes that maybe sometime in the next 20 or 30 years, we'll start teaching kids that the primary colors aren't yellow, blue. That it's going to be CMY. I think it's only a matter of time before we start to realize, let's just start teaching kids that these are the real primary colors, not red, yellow, and blue. But I don't like that criticism of that you don't get the desaturated colors, because the truth of the matter is, well, then work a little bit harder, add a little bit of white when you need to, and get desaturated color. It's like, I mean, color mixing is color mixing, and you just have a wider gamut when you're working with CMY. So it's like saying, oh, you'll have to work too hard to get the color that you want. If you, I mean, okay, if you're on a production process and you need to work fast, maybe that's a valid critique. But I think I think it's a great thing to get some tubes of CMY and see how those work better than red, yellow, blue.
Yeah. I mean, I think it probably comes from people that are more of traditional painters, like oil painters, and working with like an umber as a base painting, and then doing like dead color on top of that, and then slowly warming it up. Like people that do more of the a more Renaissance old masters process of painting. And for me, the whole reason why CMYK appealed to me is because I was used to, on a daily basis, saying, oh, I need this color. I can ballpark about how much cyan, yellow, magenta I need. Basically, I'm used to playing with those sliders to get the color I want. And I'm used to working in CMYK only because I know that's going to print pretty close to what I'm doing. And the fact that I'm used to working that way digitally means that that particular skill set of adjusting color I feel like it would adapt easier to my traditional process. So that comes out of graphic design work. It doesn't come out of the approach of being a painter, which is where I think the more traditional approach is.
Yeah. And there is always an aspect of like, I still don't know how to use Procreate, and when I heard that some artists were starting to use Procreate, just the biggest reason why they're using it is so they can work on their iPads, right? Mm-hmm. And when I heard that, I was just like, God, no, I don't want to learn Procreate. I don't have to go through learning another program, which is, I mean, I kind of hesitate to admit that, because when I was in college, I wanted to learn all the programs. That's a possibility.
Well, I mean, every time you have to learn a new program or a new platform or a new device comes out, you're just like, oh God, I'm just barely, I haven't even mastered the one I've been using for years. I just barely can get it to do what I want it to do, which is not mastering it. It's just a matter of, I can run the gauntlet and come out with results that are acceptable.
Yeah. When I'm teaching Photoshop class, that's one of the first things I tell my students. So it's like, nobody has mastered Photoshop. We're not going to teach you how to master Photoshop. Even the programmers that work on Photoshop, they're so modularized that they know a lot about the section they work in, but they could easily go down the hall and get surprised on any given day. Because for one thing, the program's grown over 20 years, but for another thing, it's still changing. It's like something that you didn't think was true even like 24 hours ago is suddenly true now, and it's just like, oh man, especially with Creative Cloud and the constant updates. Mm-hmm. But so when I'm teaching Photoshop, I tell them, like, I'm going to teach you how to navigate the program, so that way whenever you're in a situation where you need something, you can Google and navigate your way through the different hierarchies of options, and if an option isn't there, how to get that option to come up, because Photoshop eventually has to hide things in different menus, right?
Because there's so much stuff. You got to start tucking things away.
So, I mean, when I say I'm afraid to learn Procreate, it's like I should bite the bullet and learn how to use Procreate for like simple thing, or for the simple possibilities that I might be in a situation where I might use it. Plus, I mean, it does have a lot of I've heard it has a lot of cool tools especially for comic book making. And the same goes especially for Clip Studio. So that one, especially with perspective tools that they have, which I played around with a little bit, and I want to some more. The problem is I know enough about Photoshop that I can still approximate all those tools in Photoshop. So,
well, Photoshop is the big trap for artists, in the sense that anytime you have to learn a new program, there's a learning curve, and most people who have been doing digital art have been using Photoshop long enough. Let me this way: the people who excel in these new programs are people who didn't grow up with Photoshop. Whereas, we grew up with it. So anything you can show me how to do in another program, I know how to do it faster in Photoshop. Not because Photoshop is faster or better at it, but we had to figure out the workarounds when you were when 20 layers was the most number of layers you had. We had to figure out how to organize files when you didn't have layer sets. All of the different weird cheats and just the fact. Can I tell you? I don't know when Photoshop added the feature for you to rotate the canvas so that while you're working, you can put it at an angle and draw, and then you just hit escape and put it back. But when somebody showed me that, it was like a wizard coming down from the clouds, and I'm sure that thing had been around probably since like CS.
Yeah, I was going to guess it had to have been somewhere between CS1 and CS3. It had to have been around.
Yeah. But I mean, I started using Photoshop at Photoshop 3, not CS3, Photoshop 3. That was the first version of Photoshop I used.
I don't want to embarrass this, but I held out. I didn't want to use Photoshop because I was using PaintShop Pro, and for whatever reason, I was trying to be loyal to the program. That's a teenager thing to do. I see a question in the chat. Hyena Vaughn is asking about the 10,000 hour rule and how it applies to getting good at drawing. And when I'm teaching my students, it's less about the 10,000 hour rule, because and I've done this, you could just go on to Quick Poses and do 2-minute gestures for 10,000 hours and you won't get better. You have to go through, when students come into my class, I warn them right off the bat that I'm going to put them through fail cycles. I'm going to put them into bad situations and they're going to fail. And then we're going to go back through the process and figure out what happened. And because the idea is, I don't want to teach them how to draw something that's right in front of them. I want them to be able to figure out how to approach a situation when they're in trouble. Like if you draw something, if I have a student comes in and draws a bowl and they draw the bowl and the bowl looks good, what did we learn?
Yeah.
We exercised. That's like us being on a basketball court and it's like, yeah, we did our 10 laps. Our legs are feeling good. All right, good job.
It's the digital version of critical thinking, which yeah,
or the artistic version of digital of critical thinking. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the 10,000 hour rule is I mean, it's a fun little goal, but it can be something that's so intimidating it discourages people. And at the same time, it can be something that's so satisfying. People who have the luxury of 10,000 hours are going to be like, okay, great, I can do this. And then they do the 10,000 hours without actually doing what needs to be done to improve. To that effect, I'll ask yourself the question, and I don't really want to hear the answer, but ask this question: how many times have you redrawn a drawing? Because I know that's something that everybody hates doing. To redraw a drawing is to admit that you made a failure, and people hate it. You do a gesture, Superman. It's like, oh, this isn't working good. I gotta redraw it. Like me and you, we've definitely had to redraw something 1 or 2 times in our production process, but then we've also had to cut ourselves off because of a deadline. Mm-hmm. And that's what it is. But for students who are comparing themselves to other people that are working on a deadline, they don't have the deadline that's as pressing. Especially if you're studying on your own, you could do 5 or 6 versions of a pose to get better. You do 5 or 6 versions of a pose to get better, to learn. You are now having 10,000 hour rule by a lot. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot more. You can cut that 10,000 hour rule to 1,000 hour. And then the other aspect is if you focus on something. If you're trying to draw the whole human figure, that's just going to take more time because there's that much more. But if you just focus to portraiture, well, that's only going to be 1,000 hour rule or something, Yeah. Especially, or even better, it could be 1,000 hour rule. But what if you just spend 100 hours on your fundamentals of pyramids and spheres and relationship to each other, get that solid, and then you go into doing portraiture, and now it's not 1,000 hours. Now it's only 500 hours. So I know AOA was mentioning how important the fundamentals were, and so that's just another way of saying that, so.
Yeah, I think getting strong fundamentals can make it such that, if you spend 5,000 hours on fundamentals, then every hour you spend studying anything else is amplified.
Yeah.
Because now you have a framework, a solid foundation on which to build any other things you do. And plus that the learning those fundamentals it gives you a way of mentally organizing and processing things. Like I actually, in terms of writing, I've spent so many years learning how to draw and continuing to study, improving my drawing craft, that on the writing side, I can use the process that I've used to analyze what I'm doing and breaking down drawing to break down writing.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
kind of nuts up.
And then another aspect is one advantage us artists have is that we've gone through the process of being honest self-critique. That's not to say we're perfect at it. And my girlfriend's sitting right next to me, so I know. She's like, yeah, you don't pay attention to that shit. But one of the things that is making me think of, Proco recommends a book about learning. I think it's a chess master who later went on to teach himself or he went on to learn karate and became a high-ranking karate fighter too. So I don't know the name of the book, but every time I hear him there, I see a Proco video where he mentions that book, and I'm just saying to myself, there's going to be something in that book that I need to learn. So it's like, you want me to recommend a book? I'm going to recommend that book over any of the how to draw art books.
I wish I could remember that as well. When he mentioned the book, I looked it up in my my library, and my library has a digital copy, so I put it on my list. But I don't know about you, but is your read list massive of books you want to get around to reading, both for pleasure and for education?
Yeah, I don't keep an organized list. My girlfriend just pointed out this one is called The Talent Code. I'm going to hold up her phone.
Yes, The Talent Code. Yes.
There you go. So Jeremy says that he's familiar with that one. So yeah.
Tell us that, by the way.
Jeremy says hi, by the way. She says hi. Yeah, it was so hard to get up to Aroma Coffee, and I missed that place just because it was a good coffee shop. Can't wait for this to be over, and we can go back to doing that. I missed seeing Jesse too. He was in the chat 2 weeks ago, and I wish it doesn't look like he's here today.
Well, I plan to have him on at some point soon, because I think he is maybe planning to launch a Kickstarter for the collect edition of his Encoding Bushido series.
Cool.
So I definitely want to have him on to get the word out about that. But yeah, I miss getting the whole gang together. And there have been talks of getting just having like a Zoom hangout to get together.
I go through that process. If you're already doing this on Sundays, we should just crash this.
Well, you know what? I'll tell you that the hardest part, I think, is finding a time that works for everyone and get them together. Like the only reason why I even do my live stream at 11 a.m. on Sunday is because it was the one day of the week I could say, all right, I can do this relatively regularly without having to move it or cancel or have other stuff coming up. Saturdays, sometimes I've got family plans in the evening. Sometimes I've got stuff to do during the day. Sunday, like throughout the course of the day, again, there could be stuff later in the day. But usually Sunday before noon is a window where I'm like, all right. And during the week, forget about it. Who knows? The weeks are catch as catch can.
Yeah.
Because I mean, even with the day job, I don't even necessarily get to work on my comics every day of the week. More often than not, I usually will work on it during my lunch break. But even with that, sometimes it's like that time gets eaten up by other stuff. So yeah, just finding the time to get together to hang out. But
yeah, that whole adulting is hard thing. All right. As it is, I'm going to have to get going anyway, because speaking of adulting, I still have another rush I'll have to take care of. So But
Well,
this has been fun. I hope the chat enjoyed it. Happy to answer questions. Hope they were helpful.
do you want to share any links you want to point people at to see your work?
Not really, because I mean, my website I haven't updated in 10 years. Comic books being the social networking thing that it is, all my work just comes from word of mouth. One day I'll get my act together and actually present myself better. But I'm sure you can just Google John Ercek and you'll find some of my stuff online. But I don't have anything. Yeah, I don't have that much independent material up. It's all been production work for so long. So you can find me on Comic Vine. But yeah, not really. I appreciate it though.
Nah, no problem. I mean, you know what they say, that like some of the best artists are the ones that have the most out of date portfolios, because you're always in demand. You're too busy working to sit around updating your portfolio.
Yeah. Well, I wish I could say I was one of the best artists. I mean, in my small limited production artist role, it's like I have stature there, but there's room to grow. There's room to grow. So, but thanks, Jeremy, and hopefully we can do this again, maybe in a month or whenever.
Yeah, you know, next time that you're on, we can talk about deadlines and the actual the ins and outs of actual production and getting.
Yeah, I failed my fair share of them. I failed and succeeded at a good rate, stories on both ends. So that sounds fun. We can do that.
All right. Well, I don't want to keep you any longer because I don't want to be the reason for you to fail any more production schedule. Yeah. All right, man. Thank you so much for coming on. It was great to see you and to catch up.
Cool. See you guys.
All right. Take care. All right. So that was great. That was my buddy, John Ercek. I will put a link, at least to his Twitter, on in the description of the video, so at least you guys can find him that way. But I know that there was a lot of comments in the chat. Amar, I know we missed a lot of your comments, and you had a lot of great discussion about the process. We weren't able to get into and catch up with all of it, so we're gonna have to have you back sometime soon. I don't know if it'll be in 2 weeks or whenever you're free, but because I think there's a couple other people I might be having on soon, but we will definitely have another show where we get you back on so you can talk, because I know you've got a lot to share. So guys, again, thank you so much for joining me and joining us for this discussion. It was nice. It was fun to hang out. And again, apologies for not staying up with everything in the chat, but I think between John and I, we were still able to come back, check in, touch base with everybody. So again, if you'd like to support this channel, if you'd like to keep it free for everyone else, get access to the Discord server, get access to a Patreon exclusive live stream once a month. You can go to patreon.com/GERIMI. If you'd like to see the best of my social media posts, blog posts, artwork, thoughts, and ideas, see what else I'm working on, you can go to newsletter.jeremy.net. If you would like to buy physical copies of my comics, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. You can buy it also on Amazon Kindle and Comixology. So guys, thank you so much. That's it for now. Go be creative.